How you guys doing? Good? Yeah? Casey and Sully did a good job yesterday. I'm sure they did. All right. So, again, my name's Steve. That's Liz. So we're going to be taking over a little bit the next day or two. I know yesterday, main focus was a lot of the beginning stuff, right? What a program is, getting through the active warm-up. I know you guys hit acceleration pretty hard, so you're getting an idea of what our programming is, right? Does everybody understand how our programming is working when it comes to, especially when it comes to speed development? Do you guys have a better grasp on that now after yesterday, or do you still have questions on that? Like, who thinks it's just about drills? Like, you just need to do more drills. Who thinks it should be that? Okay, good. So no one's going to ask me for more drills, right? Paul's like, maybe, I might. I'm thinking about it.
I prefaced this yesterday, that the drill's not the outcome.
Yeah.
I said, if you guys ask Steve for more drills, try to give him the Steve Wheel Spark notes.
Okay.
Try.
So the goal is to understand really what speed development is, okay? Most of our athletes, I don't know what sports you all work with, but whether it be football, basketball, soccer, lacrosse, require some level of speed. We'd all agree with that? Unless you're a wrestler on a row team, crew team or whatever, you need to be fast. And understanding how to move the right way, still in my opinion, in America, we're still 50 years behind other countries. We're still very behind on how we think, right? Most people, right, how many people work in a training facility, right? You're in some version of a training facility, gym, whatever. What's the first thing you typically see when you walk in? Weights, right? People think weights are the answer to everything. They're not the answer to everything. They're a piece. They're a part of it. So what we're going to try to really dive in deep today is how to really develop your maximum speed mechanics. A lot of people shy away from maximum speed for a few reasons. One, they think it's complicated. Two, they think it doesn't really refer to their sport, when it really does refer to a lot of sports. And understanding the body positionings that we're going to show you today with max velocity relates to everything that you do. Because too many people say, well, I play basketball, I only move this way. I play football, I only move this way. Because you all know, you all grew up with one or two people that you knew were just athletic. They could pick up any ball, any sport, and they would be one of the best people on a court, on a field, whatever. Why? Because they were athletic. Like, you want to find out the fastest kid in the room, play tag. You'll find the fastest kid. Now, did that kid have multi-directional training? They just juiced you out of your jock, and you're like, oh, that kid's fast. So sometimes I think we overthink that, all right? We become too mechanical, too robotic. So what we want to work on today is understanding where is your body in space, and then how can we move it better within that space, if that makes sense to you, all right? Now, depending upon your sport, the kids, they have to start determining where they're going to make the changes. We don't do that, all right? We're not. I am a sport coach outside of here, but I'm not a sport coach when I'm in here, okay? What's up, man? How you doing? I'm Steve. Hey, nice to meet you, man. Get a chair? All right, questions, comments, concerns? All right, and you went over the slide you said, right, or no? All right, so this slide's really good because it really gets you to think of what the main areas that you're going to work on, especially when it comes to speed development, okay? Now, speed training now is much more popular than it was 20 plus years ago when I started with Bill. This is almost my 25th year of doing this. It's way different, okay? Back then, you had to buy VHS tapes from the back of a catalog. You had to rip off the paper, send it in, pray you got a tape in the mail 3 weeks later, right? Now, at the click of a button, you guys can Google, and you'll find 5 million speed exercises, right? Or you'll find every guy claiming they're the expert, you know, hashtag I'm the greatest or whatever, right? We all see that. But really understanding what's happening when people are moving is what you have to become good at. So the goal is for me, when you leave here, I'm going to ruin your life watching sports because now I want you to watch athletes and really watch how they move and see some of the trends of why these athletes move so well. All right? Yes, God went like this on some of them, gave him pixie dust and said, yeah, you're going to be a freak. DK Metcalf, freak. Okay? Doesn't mean he doesn't work hard, but he's a freak. Tyreek Hill, freak. Okay? But if you look at it, there's a lot of similarities in these athletes that were already there, but then they were enhanced. And that's what we have to look at with our athletes. Now, most of the athletes we deal with are probably how old? 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. So they're like a wet fish, right, just flopping around. We have to try to figure out a way to pull that out of them. And one of the challenges you have with kids is they're not very patient, right? Mom and dad, not very patient. They think it's like an oil change. Go in, okay, he's fixed. It could take years for this to develop. So we have to be patient with that because the thing you want to learn, we're going to go over max speed today, when you're teaching these drills or teaching these movement patterns, they're going to mess it up. And it's hard for a coach because what do we always want to see? We want to see perfection. We want it to look great. It's got to be Instagrammable so we can put it up on video. Social media has ruined training in that respect because we think it's got to look perfect for it to be an effective drill. If all of your drills look perfect, you're giving them the wrong drills because you're not stimulating them the right way to elicit a response that you want. All right? Failure will show you or expose you where they need to make adjustments. Right? If they do it perfectly all the time, then you never challenge them. Okay? So that's what I want you to start understanding. And it's hard for a kid, because if the kid plays on 5 club teams or AAU teams, they all think, what, I'm the greatest because I win a tournament every weekend, which is BS because there was 5 teams in a tournament. Nobody cares. But these kids think that it's always going to be perfection. Am I wrong? Or, oh, we came in 3rd out of 3 teams. Okay? These kids have to understand that screwing it up and messing it up will then expose the areas of opportunity to get better later. All right? So that's why I want you to really see where we're going through this. So you're going to look at some of this stuff and like, ooh, that looks hard. You're right. It's supposed to be challenging. Don't shy away from it because you say, oh, there's no way that kid can do it. And I've had coaches do that, right? We've had it, that's really hard. I don't think they can handle it. How do you know until you try? Here's the great thing about doing any type of linear speed work. The odds of them getting hurt are pretty low. They're not holding any weights. They're not sitting in a machine. They're running on a track or turf. I don't think they're going to get hurt. If they make a mistake in a drill, okay, you made a mistake. Guess what? Do it again. Now, all of you yesterday learned some different movement patterns, yes? Y'all speaking English, right? Yes, yes. All right, you're all right. So when you learn those, did you screw them up the first time a few times? Yes. So you're educated adults that probably have better control of your bodies than a 12-year-old. It's okay then if the 12-year-old messes it up as well. You have to accept that that's part of the process. But how many of you by the, 3rd, 4th, 5th rep, start feeling better? So don't we have to give kids that opportunity to work through that? And not after the first one, no, do this, no. First thing you gotta learn, zip it. It's hard as a coach. Just encourage them, let them work through. Hey, no big deal, try it again. No big deal, try it again. By the 3rd or 4th time, then give them a cue. If you're cueing them 25 seconds every single time, it's too much for them. That's a lot of stimulation for their brain, right? So if you're going through drills and Sully keeps saying, knee up, toe up, you're like, whoa, dude, just give me a second. Let me kind of work through it. Kids are the same way, and they're even more hypersensitive. How many people here have teenagers? Are they hypersensitive? You could say, how are you this morning, and it's like a bomb's about to go off. So understand that. I have a teenage daughter. I know. It's rough, okay? But understand that as we're going through this stuff. All right, so getting in nitty-gritty. So the big force, right? I'm sure Casey and Sully hammered that a little bit yesterday, right? What does that mean when we say put a lot of force into the ground? What does that mean? We're definitely pushing into it, and what is that eliciting? What's happening when the foot hits the ground? What's the chain reaction, basically? What's coming back up? You're right, but what's coming up? Let's be specific. Before that. If I strike the ground really hard, what is the end result? Okay, I'm getting what's called vertical displacement, right? I'm getting my hips and my body to be in the air. You've all heard that term, that kid flies, right? We've all heard that before? Well, technically, yes, because the more force you apply, the more in flight you'll be, right? So when you're running, you want to spend less time on the ground and more time in the air. Typically, the slower kids, and you know this, you could hear it, they spend more time on the ground, less time in the air, all right? So the goal is to get them in flight. And what flight basically means is both feet will be elevated at the same time. So if you freeze frame any great sprinter, go on YouTube, watch Bolt, any of those people. If you freeze frame them, and I'm going to show you some pictures later, both their feet are off the ground at the same time. And like those elite sprinters, 6 to 8, 12 inches off the ground. All right? So that force gets you basically elevated, gets you flight. But how do you get to that point where you can apply a lot of force? That's usually where people are like, yeah, I don't know. Hit the ground hard. You just tell the kid hit the ground hard. Like, what's actually happening? Think of the leg. Think of the speed of the leg. Nope. Because hip flexor does what? Lift. So if I want to strike the ground, what do I have to do? I have to drive from here. I have to whip from my hip and drive to the ground. Now, does the velocity of the leg affect the force that's being applied? Say yes. Yes, it is. Right? So the faster the leg goes down, the more force that could be applied. Force equals what? Mass times acceleration. The mass is what? Your leg. The acceleration is the drive into the ground, right? So the faster that leg can move, and if you have a better strength ability, you can apply more force. People think it was always about frequency and turnover, right? Like that guy's got real fast feet. It's important, but if you can't strike the ground, create that big force into it, that impulse that Bill probably touched on a little bit, you're not going to get your body to be projected, right? So when it comes to sprinting, we have to make sure the kids understand that. Because some kids will do the opposite. You'll tell them to hit the ground hard, and it's like they're slapping the ground with flippers on. Like whap, 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 whap. You ever hear? Think about that. You've heard those kids before. So there's a difference between hitting the ground hard, but also getting off the ground at the same time, all right? So understanding that the leg has to move fast and apply force, there's also a technical component of that, because what has to happen? There's a chain reaction, right? If I'm driving into the ground really, really hard, what joints are being affected? We have 3 in our leg. Which ones are being affected? All of them. Yeah, all of them, right? So if this doesn't fully extend, if this doesn't fully extend, my potential to apply force has gone up or gone down? It's gone down, right? Most kids freeze from them when they sprint, they finish here. And what happens is you think they extended their leg, because after toe off, then their leg goes to here. It's like, oh, they extended. It's like, no, they extended post applying force. They have to extend when they hit the ground. And that's one of the hardest things to teach kids. Part of it is strength, but part of it is understanding what that technical component is of the big force, right? And then the next part of it is that short time on the ground. Now it's the other end. It's like, how do you get your feet off the ground quick? Is it just do fast feet drills, like get your feet off the ground all the time? What actually is happening? Because I didn't put this slide together and build it, and I thought it was a great slide. What does this mean right here, this pulse and relax? It's kind of weird, right? Pulse, relax, what does that mean? When your foot hits the ground, right, what's happening here? We know these 2 joints, this is how I kind of look at it. These are your engines, right? These are doing a lot of the work. That's the shock absorber down there, right? What do shock absorbers do? Like spring, you see what shocks look like? A little bit of like a hydraulic effect. It kind of loads and then pulls back out. That's what's happening at the foot and at the ankle. Where kids have issues is they can't create that stiffness like a what do you call that thing? Not shock, a strut. Like a strut and a shock absorber, they can't create that stiffness, right? So when they're hitting the ground really, really hard, you'll see a collapse or a leak. So if this happens first, if that collapses, will that affect here and here? Of course it will. So sometimes we think the root is, well, he's weak. A lot of people say, oh, he's got weak hamstrings. Oh, he's weak in his glutes. Maybe he can't create any stiffness there. So if he can't create stiffness there, the rest of this chain is being affected. You could be a 500-pound squatter, but if that gives, it's like me trying to punch somebody and I roll my wrist. Well, all the force I apply from here is what? It's gone, right? So that pulsing is you about to hit the ground, creating it, and it's weird to teach it, but getting kid to pre-stiffen out before they hit the ground. You did a drill yesterday that worked on it. As everybody know, you did it in the warm-up. You probably didn't even know it was an ankle or stiffness drill. Pogo jumps, very good, okay? Any type of pogos, rudimentary jumps that we're going to go over really teaches that. And it looks like this most basic, boring drill, but how many kids can really get that pop off the ground? How many kids land and it's like, blum, blum? Well, that's telling you right now that's an area you have to attack. If you don't fix that, all the technical component stuff that you do with them is just drill work. And there's nothing wrong with it because you'll get a benefit, but will you get the max benefit? All right, so we have to learn how to create stiffness from here down. And then the relaxation part of it is after that foot hits, we have to be able to then recover, like you were saying before, then recover and get the foot up off the ground. And this all happens how fast? In about 100th of a second. It's pretty crazy, right? So we have to start working on that with the kids and getting to understand it. So when we go through some of these drills, again today, some of the warm-ups, you're going to start to see, oh, I see how that relates now to max speed. All of our warm-up stuff are not just warm-ups. You can go to any high school, watch a football game or a track meet, and you'll watch kids warm up, and you see the typical. It's garbage. It doesn't do anything. It's just work, right? Everything we're doing, yes, it's warming you up. Yes, it's working on mobility, but it has a training effect later on. Because to me, if it doesn't have a training effect, why are you doing it, right? It's just filler. It's just like, well, we did 30 drills today. I don't care that you did 30 drills. Do 4 real good ones and make the kids work and get a training effect from it. And that training effect might be that you realize, wow, that kid's really, really weak in his ankles. Or that kid's really, really weak in his glutes. And that's okay too. But get something from it. Not every training session is 100% positive. There's going to be some, if you want to call them negatives, but they're now opportunities to get better, all right? And then the proper direction is really, really important because a lot of people, when they're sprinting, don't fire the foot down in the right direction, okay? Most of what you do when you sprint, I know Sully went over yesterday, when you accelerate, you really have two directions that you're pushing in, okay? What are the two directions that you're pushing in? Horizontal and vertical, right? So if I want to move forward, I have to apply force in what direction? More of a horizontal direction because my body's at an angle. Over time, which could be anywhere for how many yards is a typical acceleration phase for our kids? How long does it normally last? 10 to 15. So over that 10 to 15 yards, that horizontal component changes over to a what? So it's becoming more vertical, all right? Once you reach your maximum speed, now it becomes a little bit more vertically based, all right? There is still a horizontal component to it, but it becomes more vertical. Why is that? So Sully went over yesterday, right? So when you're coming out of your stance, whether it be 2-point, 3-point, whatever it is, you're thinking what? Push, 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 push. Low shin angle, horizontal push. You're projecting your hips forward, right? Forward and out. What starts to happen after each stride? What happens to your angle? It starts coming up. How does it come up, though? By you lifting your body? By what? The changing of the direction of force into the ground. So if I'm pushing all horizontal, like if I push a sled, right? You've all done sleds and prowlers. If I'm pushing the sled horizontally, if I'm pushing this way, I'm projecting my hips horizontally forward. What happens is over every couple steps, the angle goes up. I'm making up a number, 2 or 3% on every stride, because what starts that you start pushing more vertically as you start getting into your max speed phase. Now, the kids who are the strongest, and strength is not weight related, strongest speed strength related, the kids that can do that the best can hold the angle of acceleration longer. And why is that important for them? It gives them more time to build up speed. Right? If you got in your car and you floored it for a second, let go, how much acceleration did you have? Not a lot. If you can floor it for 10 seconds, you can definitely build up more speed, more miles an hour. Well, it's the same thing with the kids. The longer they can accelerate for, the better. Now, that does not mean they hold the angle forever. But they should be able to hold 45, 47, 48, 51, blah, 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 until they come up to around 80, 85 degrees. Does that make sense to everybody? Now, when we get to that point, continuing to fire down vertically is where kids have challenges. Because now, fatigue sets in. And people think of fatigue as like exhausted. No, neural fatigue, muscular fatigue sets in. And what's a typical thing you'll see out of a lot of kids once they hit around, 25 or 30 yards? They overstride, right? Because they think, I got to finish this race. Or you told to get a run to that cone. What do they think? Run to the cone. Like, that's the drill. I got to finish to get to the cone. They're missing what's happening in there. So they have to understand that if they lose the direction of force that they're applying later on in the sprint, that is directly affecting what's happening in that sprint. It's slowing them down. Miles per hour went down, and time probably went up. And it's hard because a lot of kids just want to they think it's faster, right? It feels faster. Like baseball players reach for first base all the time. They think it's quicker, or they slide, which is amazing to me. They still do that. Any track athlete, when they finish a race, how do they finish it? They just get a little bit of a lean. Do they dive over the finish line? They're the fastest people in the world. I would go with what they do. Yeah? Because they're falling, basically, tripping. But typically, when they're finishing a race, the ATL was this weekend. Anybody watch any of that? Ooh, they look good. Noah Lyles, looks good. But if you look at them the last 20 or 30 meters on 100, where are their bodies? All the way up here. Now, I understand in their sport, they may need to change those angles based upon the demands. Totally get that. But our job is let's make them run in the best positions they can. They'll make the adjustments in their sport. We can't adapt what we're doing to their sport. And to me, that's where most coaches in our industry make mistakes, because they coach them as a football player or a basketball player. It's like, no. Coach them to be fast and explosive. They'll figure it out. You go to any pickup game with a bunch of guys that know how to play basketball, some of them didn't get any basketball training. They just figured it out, right? Look at basketball. Basketball probably has a lot of training, but some of the best players had no training. They're just natural. Why? Because they figure out how to push, how to cut, how to jump, how to land. It just comes naturally. And they've made mistakes. And they figure, well, that sucked. I'm not going to do that again. That guy's not going to beat me on that angle. So when we're doing the sprint work, don't try to adapt it to their sport. Adapt it to make them really, really fast. Because right now, how many people here, anybody here coach football, work with football players? All right. So if I told you right now, in your town, the fastest, the kid who won the 100 in the USA track and field, Junior Olympics, a 15-year-old, just moved into your town, but never played football before, but wants to play football. Would you take him on your team? Heck yeah, you take him. I'll figure it out. You're really fast. Well, it's the same thing with all of our athletes. If they're really fast, they're going to do very well in most of their sports. I'm not saying there's not a technical nor basic components of understanding the game. I get that, And really highly technical sports, like say like a baseball, whatever, I understand there's that application. But you take a real fast kid, drop him on a football field, they'll figure it out. Don't need to know much. Like, go that way. or you're on the line, 3-point stance, go get him. Right? We make it more complicated than we need to because we're developing the kids. So understand that when you're doing this with the kids with the proper direction. Because I've had too many coaches, my kid's never up here. Did you ever score a pick six? Ever run down the field on a kickoff? Yeah, they're in this position more than you think. That whole get low thing is BS. All right, stop telling the kids to duck their head and get low. Dig, 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 dig. Can't stand it. What does that mean? What are we digging a grave? What are we doing? All right, because they do what? They chop their feet. That's another one. Why would I ever chop my feet? You don't chop your feet when you slow down or cut. We'll get into that tomorrow. You don't. You decelerate, and you're actually pushing to get out of that break. You're not going. But every drill on Instagram does that. In sand with a weight vest on and a parachute and a sledgehammer. No, you've never seen those before, right? Never.
The sledgehammer is too accurate.
Did you like the sledgehammer in there?
Sledgehammer is too accurate.
Yeah. I mean, of course, just, hit things for no reason. It's all about core strength, man. It's all about core strength. Okay. And then mobility. What does that mean, mobility? Good job, man. All right, what does it mean, though? You're right. Yes? But what does that do for us? Why is this important? Yes, we know we got to be mobile, right? What's the difference between mobility and flexibility? Yeah, so flexibility, right, the old school way is basically lengthening of the muscle. Mobility is movement at a joint, which is what our athletes do. They move with their shoulders, they move with their hips, whatever. Flexibility to me is another BS term. Because if you're really stretching the muscle, let's be accurate for a second. If my bicep inserts here, we all agree with that, and I'm trying to stretch it, isn't my bone a determined length? Can I make my bone longer? How the hell am I stretching this out then if the bone can't move? Can anybody explain that to me? Crickets. You've been lied to your whole life. All right? So yes, you feel that pull and that tension, but are you really stretching the muscle? Or are you creating more tension in the muscle? Because what do you feel when you do that? Tension. Right? Because your body says, whoa, 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 what are you doing? I don't like that. Stop that. So it has a mechanism that kind of kicks in. What you might be stretching is, okay, maybe some of the muscle fibers got a little jacked up from working out, but you're not making the muscle longer. Unless you can make the bone longer, you can't make the muscle longer. But what happens is we get jacked up in our hips and our elbows and our shoulders from a couple things. One, training, playing in games. Two, growth is a big part of it. That's where some of the uses occur. A kid grows at 13, 14, and then they create some tightness, right? Maybe their hip flexors are tight, maybe the tendons are tight. Bill talked a little bit, and you talked about fascia. Those are contributing factors. But stretching all day long, like if you've all stretched your whole life, do you ever feel really better after you stretch? You feel like totally better, like you're ready to rock? Are you more explosive? Okay, we're going to test it today. All right. Okay. Because typically, what stretching does is what? What does static stretching do for you? It relaxes you. Right? You're telling your muscles to do what? Calm down. When you're about to sprint, what do you want your muscles to be? Excited, fired up. All right, we don't want to deaden those. We want to calm them down. Now, you yesterday went to an active warm-up. You stretched. But everybody thinks stretching is this. Okay? It's more about movement in more natural patterns.
Does that mean the more mobility you have, the more flexibility you have?
Not necessarily. Flexibility, nobody cares. Like, what's it doing for you? Show me the data that shows flexibility proves that you can run faster. Never seen it. Never seen it. Hamstrings injuries don't occur because you have tight hamstrings. They occur because you apply force in the wrong direction. Kids who overstride pull hamstrings. Me being uber flexible is not stopping me from pulling my hamstring here. I could put my head between my legs and put my feet behind my ears. That doesn't mean I'm not going to pull my hamstring. All right? Because the other thing, too, is you have to condition their body to handle being able to apply those forces over multiple times. Right? A baseball pitcher throws how many pitches in a game typically? About 100 pitches. They've worked their way up to that point, right? So hopefully they don't hurt their arm. Same thing when it comes to sprint ability. If you don't have the ability to repeat those sprints at high velocities and applying force over multiple periods of time, yes, something might eventually go. But blaming flexibility all the time, it's an easy cop-out. Every ATC will say that in high school. Tighten his flexors, tighten his hamstrings. I had it with my daughter too. She's a freshman. I'm the track coach at the school. I could tell she's going through a growth stage. First couple meets, tons of pain in here, in her hip flexors. First couple of meets. Now, we didn't have a winter season because of COVID. I said, you're just getting a little jacked up in the meets. You'll be fine. ATC, something's wrong with her hips. We got to send her for MRI. But I said, I got it. Don't worry about it. I took her to the chiropractor, got her adjusted a few times, worked on some mobility work at home. She's totally fine now. That was 3 weeks ago. But if I listened to the ATC, she'd be out for a month because they think it's flexibility is the issue. It's like, well, she's a little tight in her hamstrings. I said, good. That means she's fast. Tight hamstrings equals fast people. You take someone who's like a ballet person or whatever. Are they really flexible? Yeah. Can they apply a lot of force? Stiffness means you can run fast. So stop worrying about tight hamstrings. That's garbage. Because when you sprint, what's the prime mover? Is your hamstring a prime mover when you sprint? No. What's the prime mover? The glutes, right? So when this happens, when this happens and hits the ground, if I'm using all my hamstrings, yeah, you're gonna lose it. You're definitely gonna lose it in the hamstring. Sorry.
I just want to add something real quick, guys. Just think that on the other term, how many kids have you guys trained?
How did I hit that too many times?
Really high level and they can't touch their toes.
Sorry about that.
You know what I mean? Like some of the best athletes in the world, some of the Olympic athletes can't touch their toes. Does that mean that they're not fast? No. Of course they're fast.
A presidential physical fitness test will tell you, oh, you're going to be able to touch and reach or whatever. I failed that test every year. I never won the presidential physical fitness because I couldn't touch my toes. But I was the fastest kid in my grade. I figured that out. But some other dopey kid won it because he could touch his toes. But I kicked her ass in a race, so edit that.
One of the keys to range of motion would be like building your feet up.
Building your feet up where, though?
Like feet exercise and stuff like that. Building your arch and stuff naturally.
Well, part of what we're doing is going to help with that. I don't know if it'll help with range of motion. Range of motion comes from active movement. So everything we're doing should hopefully help with that. Part of the tightness that might occur in the joints is they don't understand how to go through those movement patterns yet. They're still not understanding that. We think everything's physiological. Sometimes it's psychological, meaning they don't understand it yet. If I teach you how to dance for the first time, I can't dance, but if a dance instructor come in here, you're going to be all awkward and tight and stiff, right? You're going to feel kind of weird. It's the same thing when a kid learns one of these movement patterns. So it may not be that they're tight, it's just they can't move through that pattern yet. So you got to give them a little bit of time. But it's easy to say, well, he's tight. The easiest things every trainer says, they're tight or they're weak. Great, what does that mean? And tell me how you're going to fix it. You're going to stretch them all day long, lift a lot of weights? You might be counterproductive on both those ends, okay? All right, so this is the big concept I want you to understand. That was really to preface all of this. It's the understanding when you're striking the ground, you're going to go through what's called a hip lock or a whip from the hip. So when you strike the ground, we talked about it earlier, you strike the ground, you're going to hit here. This leg locks. Now, people think it's hip extension. Hip extension, anatomically, if you took A&P classes back in the day, this is hip extension, okay? If I'm here, am I still in contact with the ground? No. So how important is hip extension when I sprint? It's actually not as important as you think. What's most important is when you're striking the ground, we talked about the stiffness at the ankle, then that chain reaction, this and this have to lock and push down vertically. When they push down vertically, what happens? This hip is going to lock out, and what it actually does is it also lifts up your entire hip girdle on the opposite side. It causes what's called a co-contraction. What a lot of people have always thought was if I did a bicep curl, my tricep fully relaxed. We were all taught that, right? Well, you were lied to again, because that's not exactly what happens. There is a co-contraction that's happening. I'm contracting my bicep. There is a contraction that's happening within my tricep. Not a full one, but it is contracting. Same thing here. So when I'm striking the ground as hard as I can, say with my right leg, that hip blocks out, this is what happens. This hip will also rise up. We talked about flight earlier. This is how you're going to get your body into a position to come and strike the ground again. One of the things you've always told kids is what? Get your knees up really, really high, right? Punch your knees up. Why is that? Because if your knees are up high, you must be running fast, right? So why do we tell people to do high knee drills? Because if I just do a high knee drill, what's the main focus? Of force going. What do I want the main focus to be? Down. So why would I ever tell a kid to drive your knees high? So the reason why the knee, now the leg has to get to that position. It gets to that position by you applying force, co-contraction, right? The hip lock. This will lift up the other side automatically, right? And you'll see it when kids are sprinting. If they do it correctly, this will happen. Now, a lot of coaches used to believe, and I used to read it back in the day, that if you saw any type of tilt or anything in the hips, that was bad. It's not bad because you're running. It's boom, 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 up, down. Hips are undulating, oscillating all the way through that motion. So it's a good thing if that's happening. If it's not happening, that means they're probably sinking when they run. Have you ever filmed a kid and then you look at it every stride, it looks like their hips are actually lower. Right? Slow the video down, you'll see that. So basically, if you took a string, if I tied a string onto this door, I ran that string all the way across to here, right at my hip height, where should my hips be if I'm sprinting? Above or below that string? Above the string. Think about that when kids are running. You might see them run, and every time they land, they're like this. And that's why you see that bouncing in some kids, because they're spending time going down and coming up, going down and coming up, which means I'm probably on the ground longer, which means I'm now running slower. Okay? So understanding this hip block concept is going to take some time today for you, but once the kids understand it, which will take time, you're going to see a big, big difference. And it's not, I'm going to show you drills how to get there, but there's a ton of drills. It doesn't matter which ones you do, whichever ones work best for the kid.
I've seen that a lot of bigger kids, like say high school, like line, who's like over 6 feet tall.
Yep.
And I've noticed that kids like that can't get their knees or their thighs don't come up. Does that just mean they're not applying force right, or just
They're heavy.
that when they hit the ground?
Because they're heavy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
They're heavy.
Like, if they're more stiff.
They're heavy. They're heavy. When they're 300 pounds, that's who they are. And that's okay.
So don't try to fix that.
Well, try to fix it, but your level of expectation has to be different than a 150-pound kid. You can't categorize every kid the same, right? So if I have a kid a lineman, first off, do they ever have to get up and run at top speed? Unless they're running a 40 at a combine. Their job is to move things around. But do they have to apply force? Hell yeah, they do. The difference is what direction they're applying it. But this hip lock stuff will play a real big role for them as well. So it doesn't necessarily just have to be a Olympic sprinter or someone like that. It will help everybody. Okay? All right. And then this is something that we talk about with kids. Where do a lot of kids struggle when they're running? Their posture, right? They lean over or they go like this, right? They're all over the place. And what do you hear a lot of coaches say? Oh, you got to tighten your core. You got to tighten your core. It's all about your core. That's BS because you don't do that when you run. Right? Do you go, everybody squeeze your core as tight as you can right now. Squeeze it. Do you ever feel that when you run? No, it's not an isometric contraction. Because if the hips, which I'll show you a slide in a second, if the hips are moving, if there's movement in my hip girdle, is there going to be movement in my torso and my ribs? Yes. So if that's happening, what's happening to the muscles? They're turning on and turning off to control that pattern. So by me applying force here, it will, I'm not saying automatically, but it will in a way automatically get the posture and position you want. Tell them to run with tight abs, BS. Tell them to do planks all day long, BS. You don't plank when you run. All right? You have to learn to turn them on, turn off. Because what's happening is, and you see it more with females, they tend to have more what when they run? Rotation, right? So when I'm running, I'm not rotating. I'm trying to anti-rotate or counter-rotate when I'm running. So my muscles are reacting to stop this. So how does planking help me with this? That's isometric. There's movement involved here. I have to learn to control that. So by learning how to contract the right way with the hips, that will aid in this piece of it. You don't have to say, I never say to the kids, ever, I never say, lock your core. Lifting, sprinting, I never say it. Because that's not what happens, actually. All right? Stop telling people to brace their core. And more research is coming out that that's been BS for a long time. It's a lot more about breathing patterns, diaphragms, and all that. That's more important. But understanding that piece. Okay, so if you look at this slide, this is what's happening. So if this side here is contracting, that's the hip lock. Look at the other side, the free hip. So here's the hip lock. So it's identical of here. Here's the hip lock. Look how high that free hip is on the other side. This comes up because of this. Not because this kid drove his knee high, or guy, or whoever this is. This caused this. That's the cause and effect. It's not, he got his knee up really high. No, this is what did all the work. That got him to this point. Look at a hip girdle. See the difference? See how much it rotates up? You have a ball and socket joint here, right? So when that locks out here, the ball and socket basically almost rotates the hips up automatically. But you got to get to this hip lock position first, otherwise this won't occur. Does that make sense, everybody? I know it's kind of like, oh, I never really saw that before. That's a little weird. You had a question, I'm sorry.
Is your knee coming up that high when you sprint? I thought it was like coming a little bit below the hip. Or is that just
Well, you know, you got to remember, he's doing a drill here to exaggerate that, so that might be a little higher. But everyone's different, too. Okay, everyone's different. I'm never going to tell a kid, don't bring your leg up high. If it goes up automatically and he's running fast, then it works for him. All right, watch the Olympic trials are in, what, 2 weeks? Wait, 2 weeks, I think? Or whatever they are, a week or two in Oregon. Go watch them sprint. They all have different sprint styles. Some of them can get to this position a little more. Some of them are very low. The shorter guys don't get up as high, typically. But I'm not worried about it. See, this is what I'm saying. I don't care how high this really is. I just know that this will cause this to happen. This is what I care about when I'm watching kids sprint. But when we watch kids sprint, we see this. Oh, he got his knees up really good when he ran. He must be fast. I can get an NFL lineman lift his knees up high. He's slow as piss. All right? So this is what we're really going to shoot for today. So every drill you do, the clawing, the bounding, and all that stuff, this is going to occur at some point. If it doesn't, then are we mapping back to what our mission was about applying force? So what I'm always going to say to you is, the drills that you're doing, does it get you to here? Because if it doesn't, then it was just a drill. Does that make sense to everybody? So when you're training people, do you have a goal when you have a session with a kid? Right? There's a goal. There's some type of outcome you want for that day. It could be, I just want to kick his butt today and get him in shape and condition him a little. Okay, well, that's maybe what you're trying to get out of it. But maybe that day you're trying to get him or her into a position, which might be this one here. Or maybe like a Sully work yesterday, an acceleration, getting to launch on that first step and really project their hips, right? That might be the goal for the day. But if everything you're doing doesn't map back to that, my question will always be, well, then why are you doing it? Now, you might have a good reason. But every single time you're training now, you need to think, myself, Liz, Sully, Casey, would walk into your building and say, hey, that's an awesome drill. Why are you doing that? If you can't explain why, then why are you doing it? Does that make sense? It's not to scare you. It's just to get you to pause and think. Because there are a million coaches out there that just do stuff. They just do work. Like, we got work done. We're in beast mode today. Dude, it's garbage. How hard is it to make a kid throw up or run around the building? It's not hard. Do you need any formal training for that? So our goal is, yes, we are going to work kids. Like, we're going to work today, guys. It's going to be hard. But we're going to get a training effect from it as well. And even if the training effect is, all right, I know I can't do this yet, great. Then we exposed the area we have to work on, and now the kid is more conscious of it. Because the next time they do the drill again, they'll be like, all right, I get it now. All right, does that make sense, everybody? Okay. So I'm going to fly through this next couple because I've already kind of hit them. So stiffness we talked about. It's that spring or that shock absorber type action, right? So the ability to act like a spring, the stiff tendons are really what transfers the force. Notice the word here is tendons, not muscle. All right, Bill talked about that a little bit, fascia and tendons. They're the ones that really possess the most elasticity. Your muscles do not possess a ton of elasticity. Your tendons and your fascia are much more elastic. All right, so think of them as the rubber bands. Think of your muscles as more like nylon, okay? The bands are the ones really doing all the work. We talked about this, right? Vertical impulse, greater contact time, shorter contact time on the ground. Plyos help, which we'll talk about what plyos really are. And then all sprint drills can be done with or without resistance, which we'll get into, all right? But this is what you're thinking about. This is what your ankle does when you sprint. There is that spring-like motion, okay? All right, so here's some hip lock drills that we're going to do as examples. There are, I don't know, 50, 61 of them that we probably can do, and you might be able to come up with your own versions, but these are just a few. Okay, so this one on the right, that's actually Bill's son. We were down at University of North Carolina, myself and Bill. We went to a clinic down there with Franz Bosch, who is one of the leading experts out there when it comes to speed development. I've spent 3 times I've seen him live, and I've read all his stuff. It's very, very high level. I'm not saying I'm smart. I'm just saying I'm an idiot, and I keep reading the book over and over, and I figure it out. So what we've done is taken a lot of information and transferred it down to us. It's complicated, but you'll see with this drill, it's hard to see. He's on one of those, almost like, on jerk blocks, they have the little pads that you add on jerk blocks to lift the weight up. So it's just a little pad about 3 to 4 inches. And he's basically going to do what's called a switch or a stick drill. Some of you guys might have seen this before. And you're going to see when his other foot, so his right foot hits the ground, what is the right foot going to have to do since he's at a deficit? It has to lock, right? The ankle has to lock, and then the knee and the hip have to go through that hip lock phase. If it doesn't, what will he really feel? A drop to that side, okay? So it's a little dark. Hopefully you guys can see it. I'll play it a few times. That's hard to see the black there, but let's go through it again. Let's go on the other side. Good. And he does a decent job of it, but watch it again. Does he get to, he's close to a hip lock, but is that a full hip lock yet? Oh, the other one's going to, that's all right. I'll get that in a second. All right, so this one over here that you're seeing, here's another version. So this one's at my old facility. If you can see, I'll get out of the way here. He's in a rack. There's a band over his head. So he's holding the band in overhead position. I just wanted to really focus on his legs. He's doing the same type of switch drill, trying to get him a hip lock. Now, this is actually one of my track athletes. This is last summer after he had gone 6 months with pulled hamstrings. And the old track coach just kept running him and running and running him. The ATC said he's just got tight hamstrings. They sent him to a specialist for stretching, all this other stuff. We stopped all that last spring, and we started doing all of these drills. He's set up for groups next week, and he's ranked 6 in a 200 in our group and has not had 1 ounce of pain in a year. We stopped all that crap. He does not stretch ever. I got rid of it. All right? And we stopped going to all these specialists and doctors. I told Dad, just trust me for 3 months. And this is all we worked on. Now, this is him probably about 2 months after his injury. So he's getting back. But what I liked was he's getting the velocity. Now, it's hard because his band is pushing him down. Didn't get into full hip lock yet, but he's understanding the application of force. He would overstride all the time because the track coach that he had was a cross-country coach as well. So when cross-country coaches are track coaches in the spring, how do they coach the team? Like a distance team. So sprinters got to run distance. When sprinters run distance, what do they tend to do later on in the run? Overstride. Overstride leads to hamstring injuries. All right? That coach got fired, by the way. And I took her job. All right, so this one here, this is funky. This has 2 components of it. One is a deceleration. The other part of it is the extension. So when Sully went yesterday, I'm going to pause it for a second. You did the single leg wall drives yesterday? Yes? All right. So when you do a single leg wall drive, in this position right here, okay, what's the biggest key here? Which leg? So this is my right leg. It's going to be free. My left leg's in the ground. What's more important? What am I looking at? This leg or this leg? Right or left? Who said left? Raise your hand. You're right. Or you're correct, I should say. All right? This has to do what? Hip lock. You were doing it yesterday. You didn't realize it. Get us to that position. What did it do to my free hip? It automatically brought it forward. This drill is just another drill to work on that. This is called a duck lunge. I literally made up this name because I got it from Jimmy Radcliffe. Jimmy Radcliffe, anybody know who he is? Right? Oregon's strength and conditioning coach for, 30-some years. Football and track. If you know anything about football and track at Oregon, are they fast? Yeah. Okay, so he's pretty good. All right. So I just stole this from him at a clinic. He didn't have a name for it, so I said, I'm going to make it up, and I'm going to give him credit and call it the duck lunge. I probably should have called it the Jimmy lunge, but this leg right here that's in the ground, knee is bent. That foot, she's going to get a little bit of a push off the wall, but really what we're looking for is how quickly that leg goes into knee and hip extension, or as you know now, hip lock. And then this has to have a component of a deceleration at the end of it into a lunge. Now, the way he does it At Oregon is, we just have a little body bar here. They do it with a full barbell and weights. They work their way up to guys eventually can do 135, 150 pounds. And people think they have to push off the wall harder. And what does she really have to do? Get this leg to hip lock and extend. And what does that then do to her hip girdle? Moves everything forward, okay? So let's see. This is Tyra, one of my old athletes. She was county champ in high jump. Never high jump before her junior year. And this is the stuff we did with her all the time. What do you do when you high jump? Does anybody know? When you approach the bar? Oh my God, you hip lock. Holy mackerel, he's crazy. Think about it, right? It's never jumped in her life. Now she's jumping at DeSales University. Was a field hockey player. I'm not taking credit. I just exposed to the mom one day. I'm like, your daughter should high jump. And she's like, I never thought about that. She likes field hockey. She was a field hockey player her whole life, played club, the whole thing. Never did track until her junior year. I'm like, you should run track to get faster. You know, and I'm like, I'm going to lose her. I'm like, try high jump or long jump with her. She's really explosive. Won the counties her senior year. No, can't show it again. I don't know why Tucker Carlson's on there, but. So watch this part right here. And good. Like, not great, but good. And the reason why I show, she's 16. Yeah, she didn't have her license yet. She's 16 because I drove over there that day. He's 17. I think Danny was 13 or 14. So 13, 16, 17. Those are our typical kids. I don't put up perfect videos because we don't have those kids. So I want you to see what some of the flaws may or may not be on some of the kids. Yes, sir.
That lunge, you want them to extend their leg forward, right? She didn't.
Yeah, that's what I just said. Yep. She didn't do it as well as she could. Again, remember, don't coach for perfection. Coach for progress. Look for it, all right? See what's happening there. All right, so here's some of the drills that we're going to go through today. I don't know if any of you have seen some of these before. We'll go through them. Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. All right, and this is what we talked about earlier, right? Vertical propulsion or vertical impact into the ground. Anybody know who that is? It's hard to see. That's my daughter's favorite. I had to put it on there. Allison, yeah, she loves Allison Felix. She's got to wear all the Athleta wear now, which is expensive, by the way. Jesus, $100 for. Anyway, I got her wearing Fabletics now. It's cheaper. We went to the mall the other day, and they were right next to each other. I'm like, this store is cheaper. Let's go there. All right, so increased vertical propulsion, right? We talked about that. Greater hip displacement. That's really what stride length is. People have always thought stride length is based upon what? The length of your leg. So we got a couple 6-footers in here, right? How tall are you? Yeah, so you got long legs. How tall are you? How tall are you? 6'1", 6'4"?
6'8".
All right, so in theory, you should be the fastest guy here. Is that always the case? No offense, but I'm just saying. Who typically are the fastest? What size people? The medium people, right? The ones in the middle. That 5'10" to 5'12", 6-foot-ish, 6'1". Like Usain Bolt was a freak. He was 6'4". Look at most of the sprinters. How tall are they? About 5'10", 5'11". I mean, Noah Lyles, Christian Coleman, although he's not with drugs, but whatever. I mean, listen, if you tested everybody, like, come on, let's be honest. But most of them are about that size, right? Because they have better control of the body to apply force and better hip displacement, all right? Ground contact time we talked about, and then better maintenance of speed. So we discussed all this already. I just want to show you some quick little videos on it. Okay, we talked about this, yes. So this is what's happening now. This is what we're really going to go over today. Attack the ground from above. That's a cue we're going to talk about. What does that mean, attack the ground from above? From up here? Trying to put one in? Like, what's that mean? So I'm thinking what? From here is where I'm initiating movement. Down. All right? Again, most kids think what? Lift, lift, lift. Pick the knees up, pick the knees up, pick the knees up. It's too much, right? Next, we talked about maximizing force to the ground. Get the slack out. What do you think the slack means? What does that mean? Yeah, get into the hip lock, right? So think of your hamstring and your glute as a rope, right? So when I'm here, that rope has slack in it. It's loose. When I hip lock, I get the slack out and straighten it out, right? What's stronger, a loose rope or a tight rope? Tight rope can handle a lot of tension. Loose rope can't. Same thing with your hammy and glute. Must achieve the hip lock. We talked about that. Generated by hip triple extension at the bottom. So once I go into my hip lock, then the triple extension will occur. But if I don't, you're not going to see that. Now, a lot of people will also say we got to go to extension at the ankle. That is a byproduct. You cannot teach that at high velocities. Good luck teaching that. Hey, when you're running, extend your ankle. Good luck. Let me know how that goes for you. Now, with the hip lock drills that we're going to do it in a slower motion so they can feel that and get into a full extension. But at a higher velocity, it takes time. But the application of force should aid or help in that, okay? And then short ground contact time as well. Now, this is the hard part because I just said apply a lot of force, but then I also say get off the ground quick. Like, that's a pain in the butt. Because typically you have a kid that's good at this or good at this, not at both. Would we all agree with that? Like, some kids have great fast feet, but like, dude, hit the ground harder. Or you get the other one, hits the ground hard, but it might sound like a lineman stomping the ground. We're trying to find the happy medium, okay? And then this is what we're going to go through today, all right? So with Sully yesterday, you guys did, this is mainly what you worked on, pure acceleration, right? So pure acceleration would last how long in a sprint? We're going to use a 100-meter model to kind of understand that. If we're sprinting 100 meters, the first part of our sprint is going to be acceleration, right? Pure acceleration. How long would that part last? Pure acceleration. Think about it for a minute. It's not 10 to 15. Yeah, it's going to be maybe 7 to 10 meters, give or take, for the kids. For our kids, again, I'm always referring it back to our own kids, not an Olympian. Okay, they're different people. Then you're going to go through more of a transitional phase or transitional acceleration, overall acceleration, which now you're transitioning. Here's your pure. Now your overall transition brings you into max speed. This is where a lot of kids lose their speed. They did such a great job building it up. Then they get up to this position, and what happens? They slow down a little, and then they try to re-accelerate. You ever see that? Like, you're done at that point. Like, you can't do, it's like riding your bike pedal, taking your feet off the pedals, and then trying to get your feet back on the pedals again. It's too late. Race is already done. So we have to continue to teach them that acceleration into that overall acceleration, transitioning into max speed, the only difference is going to be the body positioning and the direction of force. They're not two separate countries. All right? People think, well, I do acceleration or I do max speed. No, they relate together. Now, you might focus on acceleration more that day, or you might focus more on max speed, but eventually they have to sprint, right? I can't tell a kid, hey, run a 40, but don't accelerate if I'm timing them. They have to accelerate, unless I'm doing like flying or rolling sprints. But if I'm saying, hey, run fast, they have to accelerate. And same thing, I can't tell a kid, hey, run a 40, only accelerate, and then coast the last 20. Well, that doesn't work either. So they have to do all of these mechanics, not to say that you wouldn't spend more time in one area, because that's a lot for them to work on. But at the end of the day, linear speed is one thing. Acceleration and max speed are not two different countries. Does that make sense? They all still exist in the world. We just might focus on them a little bit differently. All right? And then multidirectional we'll deal with more. Okay, we talked about all this. All right, so here's the last thing we're going to go over, and then we'll get outside. But now your coffee all kicked in, or some of you may need more coffee with me talking. But Dr. Peter Wayans, does anybody know who he is? Okay, so he is from Texas, works at SMU. We have Texas people here, right? Right, you know SMU, right? So they have a sprint lab down there. It's probably the best sprint lab in the world, where they have a force plate treadmill, where he's done thousands and thousands of hours of research on sprint ability on athletes. And what this treadmill really shows is how much force is being applied at higher speeds. So this guy running right here, Gerard Fury, was an Olympian in, I forget, 2008 or was it 2008, I think? I can't remember. But anyway, Olympic sprinter, 100-meter Olympic sprinter. And what this chart shows, this is basically the graph, the readout. So there's a force plate underneath here. He is tethered up top. But first off, look, both feet are in the air at the same time. I didn't even start the video, but both feet are at the same time. He's running at high speeds. You can see at the bottom here, this is how much time in between every stride. So we talked about the velocity of the leg going to the ground. Look how fast that leg gets back to the ground. And then when it does strike the ground and apply force, here's how many pounds are being applied into the ground. So this is 0 all the way up to 800 pounds of force being applied per stride. Now it's in slow motion. I'll run it a couple times and we'll kind of talk through what we all see. So when this foot hits, watch where it hits. Under his center of mass, hip extends. See how the hip rises up? Then triple extension happens. Next, you see the knees? Watch the knees at the bottom under his center of mass. They almost are in line with each other at the center of mass. What you will find is a lot of the kids that are sprinting, they will strike the ground here. This knee is still behind. They don't bring the knee forward as quick enough. So what that's showing is their front side mechanic or their ability to recover and bring that leg is slowing them down as well. Because if they can't get the leg back into position to apply force, and it doesn't really matter anyway. So if you freeze frame it, I'm going to try to get it right in the middle there. Oh, sorry. Get that out of the way. Okay. So what happens is, when they're running, when this foot's striking, this leg is already moving in that direction. With the slower kids, you're going to see this leg will still be back here, that trail leg. You're going to see that kind of like tail waggling back here. The quicker they get this through, this knee aligns with this knee, that is going to show you that this leg is already in a position to come back down, strike again. If not, this leg might be on the ground longer, and they may not be able to get that leg all the way through, which means they're not going to run as fast. They're not going to apply as much force as they want. So this is something that I've picked up over the last couple of years. I always saw it, didn't understand it, now I understand it more. Elite sprinters do this really, really well. They do it really, really well. Our kids, typically, you're going to see this leg hanging out back here. And this impulse that you're seeing with the foot at the ground, you're going to see like that hydraulic or that shock absorber spring that we talked about push up, because it's going to have to load and then come up off the ground. Right? It's not, because some kids will try to land, what's the old school term? Run on your toes. Right? We're not running on your toes. You're landing flat-footed, and then I call it the hydraulic because kids understand it. That hydraulic is going to lift it up. Then that causes the chain reaction. See, he has the dots on here because he was checking how much extension was going on here and here. That lifts the hips up, and then you see both feet are in the ground. I'm sorry, in the air, not on the ground, for a long period of time. So watch. It's going to hit. Strike. Then it goes up. That's the last thing to go. Everybody thinks that extends early. It doesn't extend early. It actually extends late. Hip lock, knee, then here. It goes from attack here. Attack straight down and come back up. I'll do it one more time. I wish I could. Where's the tech guy? How do you get this to repeat? I don't know how to get to repeat. So watch. Down. Extend. 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 Attack down. All right. Is he going like this and trying to reach out and kick? No. Where's the foot coming? People think that's out, but it's the center of mass. Remember, he's being tethered. If this weren't here, where would the hips be going? Forward. Okay? So when you're striking the ground, you're striking the ground under your center of mass. Now, you might see, it might look like they're going to land in front, but what happens is because you're already moving, you land, your center of mass then comes over your foot. A lot of people think, well, because what's one of the old school drills? B-skips? You guys ever see those drills? What's a B-skip drill? Why was that invented? Who invented it, and why was it invented? See, this is where I'm going to start testing you guys, because you just know drills, you don't know what they're for. A B drill is from Gerard Mach. Anyone who Gerard Mach is? And I say this in every presentation because you should know who he is. He invented all those drills, A skip, B skip, C skip, all that stuff. He was a Polish and Canadian sprint coach. Poland and Canada, what type of winters do they have? Cold, snowy. They think that people can get outside and sprint. So he had to come up with a way to train his sprinters to do sprint mechanics, but really do speed strength type drills to condition their legs to be ready to sprint outside. So he invented these drills to teach that. This B-skip drill is just a deceleration drill for the hamstring. That's what it's for. It's not a technical drill, but people have made it a technical drill. So teaching the kid to go like this, that's not technical. It's just teaching the hamstring to decelerate. So now when the kids get outside in the spring and sprint, they're ready to do it. That's what it was really invented for. Now all the A-skip stuff, most people don't do it correctly. Right, most people A-skip like what? What the hell is that doing? A lot of swag. I see a lot of swag on the football and track fields and stuff, right? I see a lot of that.
That's what it's about.
It's all about swag. I definitely don't have any swag. Sully's got way more swag than me. All right? But when the kids are warming up, there's a difference between like this, then this, Which one would you rather see? What's going to have a training effect? But if that's what they're doing all the time, they're training that motor pattern. And you got to break kids from that. Okay? Don't just do a drill because, oh, I did that drill. That's what I hear from coaches all the time. We do that drill. Really? Do you really do it? Do you really understand what's happening? Coach the crap out of that stuff. That's the stuff you got to coach the crap out of. That's what we're going to do outside. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir.
Say if we corrected them on how to do it right, but then they keep with their school and their coaches and changing the form, how do you, which way
Go punch the coach. I'm sorry. This is what I tell the kids. You do what the coach needs you to do on the slide, so to speak, and just do your other thing. Here's the bottom line. If that kid runs fast, I don't think the coach is changing it. All right, typically. But just do it your way. Because if the coach keeps yelling at you, I mean, what are the odds of them totally butchering it the way the coach doesn't want it? Probably not too much. And if that kid's the fastest kid, and if I were you, if there's really an issue, call the coach. You can't be afraid to talk to coaches. Because here's the problem. They are egomaniacs, power-driven nut jobs that get paid $5,000 a year to coach a sport. Remember that. I am one of those. Okay? Right? They're not Bill Belichick. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. Call them up and say, hey, I'm working with little Johnny. I heard he's doing well with you. Just want to check in. Hey, this is the stuff we did with him. He's a great kid. He loves playing for you. If I can help you in any way. And, hey, I heard what you do was great. Can I come watch one of your practices? Because now you're putting them in their power position a little bit. Like, hey, I want to learn from you. Wink, wink. Check it all out. But, hey, man, I love what you did. You know, I'd love to come down and show you some stuff that we do, too. I got some variations that you might like. If you present it that way, most coaches will be okay. Not all of them, because some of them are ego freaks. Because remember, this is all they have in their life. The trophies in their office is all they live for. And it's for us, it's beyond that. So you just got to, what's that? Yeah, well.